Patty. As you all know, one of my great loves in life is finding the beautiful diamonds within York itself and exposing our clubs to them. My other great love is finding people that have roots to York that have gone out and done amazing things, and to be able to bring them back home to address our club. That is certainly the case today. Our speaker is Eugene Ludwig, the founder and CEO of Promontory Financial Group. Gene is a trusted advisor to many of the world's leading financial companies and is widely recognized as a far-sighted thinker on the most pressing issues confronting financial services. Gene shared with me earlier, if you take the top 100 financial institutions in the world, his company deals with 100 of them. So pretty impressive. Before founding Promontory, Gene was vice chairman and senior control officer of Banker Trust New York Corp. And Gene is possibly best known as the Clinton administration's U.S. Comptroller of the currency from 1993 to 1998, the regulator charged with oversight of the nation's banks. Gene is the son of the late Jacob and Louise Ludwig, and he was raised in York, attended York Suburban High School. His father was a local doctor and a very proud member of this very club. Gene went on to receive his undergraduate degree, magna cum laude, from Haverford College in 1968. He received a scholarship to Oxford University, which Gene confirmed with me, which was my suspicion that is where he met Bill Clinton as a fellow classmate. And he earned a Master's of Arts at the Casby as a Casby Fellow, and he holds a law degree from Yale, where he was also editor of the Yale Law Journal and chairman of the Law Legislative Services. Gene lives in Washington, D.C. with his wife, Dr. Carol Ludwig, and they have 3 children. Gene will cover the state of the national economy and the financial sector with an emphasis on good jobs, infrastructure, and education. We'll also discuss the changing landscapes in finance and RegTech. And there will be time for questions, which he says he's open to questions about politics. Fellow Rotarians and guests, please warmly welcome York native Gene Ludwig.
Mike, that was an overly nice introduction. I really appreciate it. I did in fact record it. I recorded carefully because my 2 daughters and a son don't believe Daddy does anything right. I will be able to play it back to them. They still won't believe it. They still won't believe it, but I'll at least have equal time. It's a tremendous honor for me to be here today. I am indeed a proud Yorker. My father was a proud member of this club for judge 20-30 years, and my brother Ken won a Rotary fellowship from the club when he was in school. So Rotary, generally speaking, which is a fine service organization, and this club in particular is near and dear to my heart. So it's an honor to be here for that reason. It's also an honor to be here because, as I said, I'm a proud Yorker. And when I came, I haven't been here, I'm sorry to say, in a decade. It's really a disgrace. But as I said to Mike, I've spent most of my time running around the country with a butterfly net trying to catch my kids for a weekend here and there when I'm not traveling around the world. And I was struck as I was coming up from Baltimore, you know, the beautiful rolling hills haven't changed. The farms, now it's late springtime, are as beautiful as ever. But actually, and so when I entered, I said, you know, what makes York special, it's such a beautiful part of the world. But when I came here, actually, and Mike and I were talking, and Dr. Ben Hoover and I met each other almost the second I walked into the club, and then I saw the McCabe's and Art Cayley, still Mr. Cayley to me. What struck me in meeting the rest of you is what makes York special is not just the physical landscape. What makes York special is the people and the values of this community, which are so typified in the Rotary Club and its civic mission and the kind of quality people and and work you do every day. So again, honored to be here. Now, today, in terms of getting a lens on where we are from an economic perspective, I'm going to basically take you down a road that you wouldn't have expected, and that's technology. And I'll explain why in a minute. And as Mike said, at the end, if there are questions, I'm pleased to say a few words about Washington. I've been in Washington for 40 years. That probably makes me, by dint of residency, a card-carrying member of the swamp. so I can describe it to you a bit, including alligators, crocodiles, and the rest of the swamp creatures. I would start today by telling a joke. You've had a busy week thus far, and everybody likes a joke, but I'm not going to do that, and let me explain why. I was a lawyer for 20 years at the law firm of Covington and Burling after law school in Washington, and all of a sudden I became Comptroller of the currency of the United States. And what's of the many daunting things about it is that there is a great deal of public speaking. So my first speech, about 3 or 4 weeks in, I'm up before 10,000 people giving a formal address. And I start and I say, look, it was the American Bankers Association convention. I said, I'm going to tell you a joke and give the speech. I do that, and it seems to be all fine. Next is about a month later, and it's the Independent Community Bankers of America conference, about 8,000 people. And I said, tell the joke, give a speech. 3 or 4 weeks later, I'm before the American Community Bank Conference, which is the old Savings and Loan Association, trade association, and a little smaller, about 5,000 people. And I say, I'm going to tell the joke, give a speech. Before I can, almost the word joke came out of my life, somebody jumps out of his seat, just about where Steve Rotz is, jumps out of his seat and goes, so I realized that the keeper didn't want to hear a joke. On my way out after, I didn't tell a joke. On my way out after I had given my speech, I'm going to the back of the room, and this fella comes up to me and puts his arm around me, and I recognize him almost immediately. He's one of my employees at the Office of Comptroller. And before I can do anything, he says, you know, Mr. Comptroller, he was kind of a southern Midwest, I forget, sort of Texas accent maybe. He says, you know, Mr. Comptroller, he said, you're way too important to tell jokes. He said, you meet with the President of the United States once a week in the Oval Office. He said, you meet with the Secretary of the Treasury and the Chairman of the Fed every single morning. I see it every single morning. He says, it isn't like the old days when you're just a lawyer, Gene. He said, Mr. Comptroller, he said, you're too important to tell jokes. You shouldn't be telling jokes. So, of course, like many government newly nominated and appointed people, I took that to heart. And I said, oh, I'm really important now. Oh, I'm really important. I can't tell jokes. And so for the next 5 years in office, which is a term I served, I didn't tell any jokes. Last day, they have this silly old tradition at the Comptroller's office down to today, where they paint your portrait, and they unveil it, and they have a big ceremony, and most of the senior people in the financial part of the government come to see the portrait unveiling. I was just there a few weeks ago for my successor's portrait unveiling. By the way, if you want to see mine, it's actually hanging in the garage backwards. It's so good. but in any case, yeah, no, it's not in the National Portrait Gallery. It should be. So it's one of the few times that beer and wine is served in government, and at least to a larger crowd. Lo and behold, after the portrait unveiling, this same fella who told me how important I was, I couldn't tell jokes, comes up to me, and he's had a little too many to drink, and he puts his arm around me the same way he did before, and he says, you know, Mr. Comptroller, when I told you should be telling jokes because you're so important, weren't true. You just tell them so bad. So, that was the end of a life of joke telling. So no joke today. Today, I do want to say a word about finance, but from an unusual angle. As Mike said, What I do in life in part is now, after having run a bank for a time, I run several companies that I founded, one of which is a global advisory firm, 15 offices all over the world, and then I have two other companies. One's a financial.com and one's a small bank investment fund, and a couple other things I do. The advisory company is a great thing, but lo and behold, about 11 years ago, it dawned on me that giving advice the way we were doing it wasn't working, because you give people elaborate advice, they try to take it, but when they went to implement it, for these big organizations, it's very hard. They have hundreds of thousands of people. They're all over the world. And that what was really needed was a combination of the advice, but a technology back end. That we couldn't really do our business, even in the advisory business, let alone, of course, my .com thing, if we didn't have technology. So I went to IBM, and I'd known them because when I practiced law, I represented the PC division. I was their lead outside counsel about 30 years ago. I said, what great combination would be your technology and our advisory. And they were very polite. We were about 100 people then. There were 400,000 people. They must have thought I was crazy, and they said, thank you very much. Really nice to see you. Goodbye. But lo and behold, about a year ago and a couple of months, I got a knock on the door by the most senior person at IBM, said, we've been thinking about this, and you were right and we were wrong. That the combination of your global advisory business, which has now become a good deal larger than it was then, 11 years ago, and our technology would really be able to advance the ball in ways that you were foresight enough to see. So I sold the advisory business to IBM. And since that time in particular, with the new Watson cognitive technology, I've spent a great deal of time involved in technology and finance. And it has rekindled thoughts that I have had for a very long time about the state of the economy, technology, and finance going forward. And so that is the lens I want to have us focus on, because I think it is so important, and I can say I sort of voted with my feet. The fact of the matter is that if we're to understand where we are in our world today, economically or otherwise, what we're seeing emerge is simply a technology story. Just think of what's happened in our lifetime. When I was growing up in Verdon Drive over here, a few miles away, in the 1950s and 60s, the television screen was that big, and it was black and white, and you could hardly see it. You still had party lines when you picked up the telephone and talked to people, let alone cell phones. You had cars that were sure snazzy looking with big fins, but they were sort of unsafe. They didn't have many features, and nobody had air conditioning in a car. Today, just think of what's changed. Do you know that there are more portable telephones, more cell phones in the world today than there are toilets? I'm going to go through some numbers here. The world has transformed dramatically because of technology. And I've said to folks in finance that I advise, the last 20 years in finance from a technological point of view have been astounding. But indeed, globalization in finance and globalization generally, to a great degree, is just a derivative of technological advances. The internet, communications, and think of all the good things it's done. Modern medicine over the last century wouldn't be possible if it wasn't for technological advances. But I say to my financial clients, what's going on in the last 20 years is child's play to what's going to go on in the next 20 years. And there, our lives will be transformed and those of our children in ways that we can only guess at, but in ways that will be astounding. And on the more challenging side of technology is that some believe that this is the first period in the history of modern advances since the printing press in 1413, that technology will be a jobs destroyer, not a jobs creator. I can tell you, having worked with, and I work with Watson almost every day, that's the new and properly called augmented intelligence. It isn't, artificial intelligence is actually wrong. The technological advances to date, which are, having machines that are in fact cognitive, learn, make decisions after they're taught, have a lot of the properties of a personal advisor, but even better than Echo and Siri by far. Those technologies are only at the beginning stages. But they will no doubt create efficiencies that make some jobs go away. The question, I think, before the House for finance and everything else is this something that we should fear? Is it something that we should welcome? And I would say that myself, it's something that is inevitable. Trying to push back technology, and there's certainly elements of this country, I think, that are quite Luddite in that regard. There is a hope that we can retake the old days, that only for the old days life would be better. Well, whether or not it would be better, it's over. Things are changing at a clip that is simply going to change our world, and we have to learn how to deal with it. Now, I'm a bit of an optimist. I think at the end of the day, we'll change things for the better, including for jobs. But let me say a word about the profound changes we're looking at and why. The Apollo, and I want to give you a bunch of facts. So the Apollo guidance system computer, go to the moon, had a computer, big new thing, the Apollo guidance system, today is the equivalent in brain power of a Nintendo game. Today's server, and many businesses have servers, is 1 trillion times more powerful than a server of 60 years ago. Computer processors, as we know, Moore's law is still intact, double in speed every 18 months to 2 years. The first gigabyte hard drive was announced in 1980. Just think of 1980, not so long ago. By comparison, today, that was a big deal for a supercomputer, 1 gigabyte of hard drive. Today, your cell phone has 256 gigabytes, the cell phone i7. I mentioned about the cell phone changes. One of the ones I thought amazing, because I probably got in the queue. Motorola, when it came out with the first cell phone in 1973, they cost $4,000. And today, 95% of Americans own one. 214 marked the first time, as I said, there were more mobile phones in use than humans, 7.2 billion mobile phones. Only 3.5 billion people have toothbrushes, and only 4.5 billion people have access to toilets. So I guess this figure is even better than I thought. It's not that they have toilets, they have access to toilets. Now the most important statistic, and then I'll stop, is this one. There were more patents issued in the last 15 years than in all of human history. And the number of patents issued last year, 361,000 something, is double what it was 10 years earlier. So you're seeing a speed of invention, the likes of which we've never seen. And it will be transforming in ways that we can't predict. Now, what do we do about it? I think there are two things that are critically important in the world that we're edging into or leaping into, maybe a better way to think about it. One is we've got to retain, I think, what has made this club so special, at least my experience in New York special, and that's values. We have to be able to maintain standards and values, and the kind of just human framework that has advanced us to this date. And I'm rather optimistic about that, actually. America is still a place where, for all the debate and political shenanigans, as one of my former colleagues at the law firm used to say, Washington is one part chicanery, one part buffoonery, but one part civic good. and I think that part civic good still exists today, and it's important to maintain that. So that's one thing. But the second thing is that for all the concern about the technological changes, which we are going to have to adopt to, and we will adopt to, and thinking about technology as a jobs destroyer, one of the big mistakes I think people are making is not to look to the future, but to look to the past. The era I think we're going through is akin to 1492. The horizon ahead offers change and opportunity beyond our wildest dreams, curing virtually all diseases, the ability to cure poverty, curing cancer. I think is just the tip of the iceberg of things that can be cured in at least some of the younger members here's lifetime. And I think the notion that we will have advanced basis colonies on Mars, on the moon, beyond is simply the future. And the opportunity set for a more exciting, dynamic world and opportunities for our young people, I think is real. And if we embrace it, there are jobs galore, because we really need these changes. Diseases, if not attacked, get worse. We have a growing global population, whether we like it or not, and technology can help us to a very great degree in dealing with larger population. Look at the food growth situation. There have been more predictions over the last 300 years about the inability of the planet to sustain even much smaller populations. And the reason we're able to sustain such a large population today is the dramatic changes in technology that affects food growth. So I think we have to look up. If one wants to take this into the practical, so what do we do now? Here's what I think we ought to be doing now. I think that we really ought to have a major infrastructure bill. Both parties, both candidates, President Trump and Mrs. Clinton, advocated for big infrastructure spending. It does a couple of great things. It creates real jobs, and it solves needed problems. And beyond that, we can't spend enough in education, clean energy, and technological advances, and that means NASA, et cetera. Now, some will say in the room, they'll say, okay, I hear you. I even heard you're a Democrat. You must be a tax and spend Democrat. Sounds like tax and spend. And no, I think I'll tell you, this I think is the heart of what I hope will an economic change in our economic future. It's this. We have been focusing on the budget the wrong way. We like to analogize the budget to our pocketbook. And everybody knows that if you have $100 in your pocket and you go out and you basically run up debts to $150 or $200, you're in real trouble. And if families do that, they're in real trouble. So we got to balance. I think what's been wrong with that is both the analogy and what history ought to teach us. There's a difference between investment, real investment, and just spending. The analogy should be to a corporation. There is no corporation in the United States, there is no business, a small business, a middle-sized business, a large business, that over the course of its life cycle hasn't gone to the financial markets for equity capital, debt capital, whatever. You cannot grow a business, and everybody, God knows in this room, understands that, if you don't invest in the business. And so in constructing the federal budget, what we should be doing is differentiating between those expenditures that are capital expenditures, which are investment oriented, and those expenditures that are simply spending money willy-nilly that is not going to come back to us. By the way, some of the money spent willy-nilly is for good causes and good purposes, and we ought to do it. But that's a different kind of spend than spending on investment. And in that regard, we do have an important precedent, and we haven't learned from it. So World War II takes place, and in 1950, we're left with a budget deficit that is the largest budget deficit per capita in the history of the United States, much greater than what we have now. So we enter the 1950s with this huge budget deficit. So what does Dwight Eisenhower do? He decides to create the Highway Trust Fund, and we spend on building highways and roads and bridges and hospitals and investing in America. And what is the result of that investment? The result is more jobs, more activity, more tax dollars, because more things are happening, and we get in a position where we can actually balance the budget. It is impossible, as much as all of us believe in savings, and I sure do, but it's impossible to save your way to growth. You've got to invest your way to growth. So for financial institutions, which I'm happy to sort of answer questions about, in a narrow sense, enormously important part of our economy. I've spent my life involved in them one way or the other. But the big questions, I think, are really technologically oriented, because we have to accommodate to these changes which are coming one way or the other. And I think they offer us more opportunity by far than detriment, and in any case they're coming. We have to do it on the basis of strong values, the values that are reflected in this room. And then we have to basically, as a nation, show the kind of courage that Eisenhower showed after World War II in terms of investing in ourselves, our children, our future, our country. Otherwise, I'm afraid, we are headed down a path that will lead us to no good. So with that said, those are my kind of formal remarks for today, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. Yes, sir.
Mr. Ludwig, you mentioned that there were three investments that we, the federal government, ought to be making, which were infrastructure, education, and technology. I'd be interested in your comment as to how we should invest as a government in technology, because the investment in technology is not the same investment as in infrastructure. And frequently, government investment in technology is counterproductive, a la what we've seen with nuclear fusion, for example, and some things like that. How should that be done?
Well, that's a really good question. The question is, okay, maybe I buy your ideas about investing in infrastructure and education, but this investment in technology stuff is really more complicated, because we've seen, what one would say is not very much success or wasted investment in technology. Fair enough. In a sense, investing in technology is like being a venture capitalist a little bit, in terms of starting a new company that's, has no track record, just ideas, and you put money down, and as you know, anybody who is a venture capital investor, sometimes you hit the jackpot, but many times you hit a dry hole, to mix metaphors. But if you think of the track record here, like everything else is balance. And by the way, I think one of the most wonderful things about Pennsylvanians, and York in particular, is a wonderful sense of balance and common sense. So I think it's a matter of balance. Look at the history, however, of the original NASA programs produced all kinds of spin-off technologies. When we go Gore-Tex, we have Gore-Tex. We have all kinds of other, advanced plastics come actually from the space program. When we think of the internet, which has, produced an enormous transformation in the world and our society, the internet is a government project. It wasn't a private sector project. When we think of the medical advances that have come out of the National Institutes of Health, they're just, awe-inspiring. And then there's some technological spend, I'm sorry to say, which is a must, but it is, and spins off other kinds of productive businesses, but it's in military. We simply are sadly in a world where we can't stop spending on technological advances in the military. We got all kinds of problems. So we have to be judicious about how we do it, but it seems to me that we ought to be doing it. Certainly at NIH and several other these programs. But for me, the most important thing that we can possibly do in terms of spend right now is on education for our young people. If we don't do that and we don't give them the tools for the future, those folks who are left out will not be able to cope with the future, will not be able to have jobs. As you know, the statistics are that, in fact, there are, even today, tens of thousands of jobs that are empty that we can't fill because they're engineering jobs and high-tech jobs, and those jobs we need to go abroad to find the people, because we don't have them here. That's a sad story when you basically have underserved populations, low and moderate income populations in the nation that don't have jobs. But they're never going to have jobs if they can't deal with the modern technologies. And so we are going to have to double down, it seems to me, to have a fair society and a productive society in the educational spend area. And as anybody who's been involved personally in education, you know this is hard, because it's not just spending money at all. It's much more itself about advancement and proper spending of money. So anyway, I hope that answers the question. Okay, start here and then go there.
Yeah. Well, first of all, congratulations on establishing Promontory as the go-to financial risk management consulting firm. That's fabulous. Yeah, I'm interested in the increased prevalence and advances in augmented intelligence and machine learning. How has that changed Promontory's business, and what internal changes are you making to ensure a sustainable competitive advantage?
Yeah, this is we have a room of people this smart, so we start out with great question number one, we move to great question number two. So I start Promontory, the advisory firm. What does it really mean to be a technology firm dealing with augmented intelligence, and how can you use this in a way that is going to sustain the high quality of the firm that we're noted for? And I think the answer is this. As I said, I don't think that you can go forward just simply giving advice and it not working. You've got to give advice that's going to, at the end of the day, solve people's problems. Because after all, what do people want? They want solutions to their problems. That's what we owe clients. That's what we owe governments. What we do. And I don't think they can solve without technology. Now, I think there's a lot of technologies that are important here. But let's say a word about augmented intelligence and Watson and why that is so valuable. So let us take something, to go into the mundane area here, so I apologize for boring people, something in the anti-money laundering area. As you know, anti-money laundering has become a big thing ever since particularly 9/11. The government has asked the financial system to basically make sure that they report on and look at every single transaction to ensure that those transactions don't involve money going to terrorists that could blow up the country. And lo and behold, although there is an enormous amount of paper generated, an enormous amount of waste, at the end of the day, there have been insights gained from this exercise that have been important for the anti-terrorist movement. But when you think about trying to get it right, it's pretty hard. One of the entities in the nation has 5,000 people that review alerts. An alert is generated by a computer that says this could be a suspicious activity, could be a bad thing, but we have no technology yet that's able to itself identify the bad things and differentiate everything. So human beings look at them, and I think, by the way, we'll be looking at things till the end of this program, at the end of time, because remember, I'm talking about what I see as augmented, not artificial, and it's not going to supplant human beings. But here's the problem. So you have 5,000 people go to work every day at this huge institution, and they look at these alerts to see what really looks bad. And you and I both know that if 5,000 people go to work every day, there are 5 people come on a bad day make mistakes, right? It's human nature. We all make mistakes. I make mistakes. I would tell you about the mistake that my builder made. We're building a summer home after 30 years of renting, but I won't bore you with this. Walking in, human mistakes, mistake. So say there's 5 mistakes a day, and that's probably a pretty low number. And there's a 200-day work year, roughly. And so that's 1,000 mistakes a year at this one institution. And because they're wholesale transactions, that's billions of dollars a mistake. And that means there's a cohort of transactions that could be filled with terrorists that they don't catch. And the government can't just simply say, we'll forget about that 5,000 mistakes and just cross our fingers, because they can't do that. So what do? They then knock on the bank's door or pound on it. Got to do better than that. And without technology, it's hiring another 5,000 people or however many, and they're going to make mistakes too. So technology has the ability, as a general matter, even robotic technology, to put a floor under the decision making such that the most common things don't fall through the cracks. Not a good thing. So that's an example of adding technology to financial, review in this case, and it would avoid a bunch of those mistakes. But what does augmented intelligence do? Augmented intelligence actually learns, and they've been using this in cancer centers. It was the first use of Watson at Sloan Kettering, and they got the Sloan Kettering super cancer docs to teach Watson how to think, how to read. By the way, Watson reads, it hears, it can tell difference in voice tones, it can do it in different languages, and it can respond to you in all kinds of different ways. Literally reads, because that's a neat thing. So what they needed was the teachers for Watson in finance. That's us. And plus Watson learns from the data that's coming in, just like the cancer docs. And when Watson will give a probability of what is likely wrong here, the cancer docs would say, nah, that's not quite right. And then Watson learns from that and becomes smarter in that area. And same here. So you go back to my floor analogy, the floor keeps going up. It keeps getting better. And it keeps being a greater assistance. And what does that mean? It means the government gets better data that is more accurate so it can spot the terrorists. The human beings have a tool that can help them not fail. The financial institution fails less, and it's going to have less orders and less waste. So it's a net win for everybody. But it's a tremendous change. And you can imagine this doing it in all kinds of different areas, which are, what about tail risk? What about financial risk? What about credit risk? It's a powerful tool that will be able to help us in our daily lives, and it's exciting to be part of it. For our job, and it's interesting because having spent now the last 8 months really working with Watson since the deal, our job is to make sure that it meets our standards. And I've been a pretty noisy guy to make sure that, and happily I've got a wonderful partner in IBM that is just as concerned about the quality as I am and the results, to make sure it's the best tool, doing the best augmented results, just as I like doing in Sloan Kettering and some of the other great hospitals around the United States. Yes, sir.
As I understand it, the underpinnings of all of this future success is going to be our values and the development of community. How does the financial field, how do they develop their value system, and how will it develop communities?
Really good question. So another fabulous, thoughtful question. You guys are better than questioning than the United States Congress when I sit up there. So how does the financial field, live up to the values that we have to in the future? And look, I'm proud to be part of the financial community in America. I think net, it's done great things, and I'm a huge supporter of community banks. In fact, one of the stories I'm going to tell about technological change is how it improves the workplace. And in that regard, one of the guys who made big improvements in health and workplace was a guy by the name of John L. Grove, right over here in Greensboro, Pennsylvania. Now, it happened when John formed his second company, JLG Lifts. You probably see these lifts, the contour lifts. They lift people up to wash windows. I was his lawyer. So John was a farm boy. And you know, there are a lot of farm boys in York, Pennsylvania, who invented a lot of great medical changes. I have one of the scales of one of the doctors from here in the 1890s, 1900s was given to my dad by him, who was the first person to understand how to use oxygen in heart cases. And so John was concerned about people losing their arms and limbs, you know, doing construction, and he invented the crane and then ultimately invented the JLG lift to stop that. He would never have been able to do it had it not been for his community bank that lent him the money to get his business started. And I remember my father, and I almost say this in terms of what we've got to be doing as a nation, is he wanted to build his office. He was, you know, came back from the Second World War and was late. And at age 45 or 50, he wanted to have his own office here in New York, but he talked to the local banker. And the local banker, I think it was York Bank and Trust Company in those days, Dad said, you know, I'm a little nervous, you got to walk before you run. And he said, Doc, at your age, you better jump up and start running. So good advice, good sound advice. As a world, I think we better jump up and start running. But you've read, having said all of that, and rightly so, about, you know, tremendous mistakes that the financial community has made, where you'd have to say, where are the values? Well, what are they doing? Are they just about making money? And we've been through 2007, which is not a pretty picture. There is certainly a danger in finance, like everything else, that it focus, you know, simply on economic return and not on what it ought to be doing, which is serving its customer needs. And we have to remind all of us in business, and you as a Rotary Club are enormously important around the world, to remind the business community that what this is all about is service. It's coming up with products and services and financial tools that help our customers, help our communities, the way they helped John L. Grove and helped my dad. We've got to continue to do that. But, you know, like the revolutionary period, if we don't basically take the responsibility to continue to demand that of ourselves and our business colleagues, you know, it fades away. That's just human nature, the sad part about human nature. But the other side of this goes back to technology. Because on a lot of things, a lot of these good words, every financial company in the world, every business company in the world, you go into their lobby, integrity, you know, service, whatever it is. I do too. But the only way really to apply that in a lot of ways, for a large populations of workers, 400,000 to some of these banks, is to have technologies that can spot problems, you know, help people train them in an efficient fashion, because you're just dealing with larger populations across the globe with different, you know, experiences and in some pockets different value systems. So I don't think there's an immediate solution. It's something we all have to work on, and have worked my professional life to try to achieve it. Since I've been controller, I mean, in some ways, I laugh that part of our business is being the financial systems proctologist. Awfully hard to sell those services, I can tell you. They're not always welcome. But you gotta be in a position in your life to speak truth to power. Speak truth to power. And that's what we do for a living. And that's, I think, incumbent upon all of us, and including our political leaders. Yes, sir.
There's an actor on TV that tells me every day I'll be moving into gold and silver, and he does so because of the increasing national debt. Did I understand you to say to him and to the Tea Party Republicans that that's not really a problem, that that's just investing for the future? Is that what you said?
So the question is, you know, this gentleman, you know, and we all, you know, listen to television, people say, oh my God, big debt, gold and silver, only future. And you know, then, you know, am I saying to, you know, folks who believe that balancing the budget is the most important thing in the world, that that's all wet? No, I'm not saying that. I do think that we have to have a degree of fiscal responsibility. And I certainly do believe that the government sector can get too large. And at the end of the day, the private sector is critical in America to get us out of our ditch. Government will not do that. It takes the kind of private initiative, energy, talent that you see in this room. It's not going to come from government. But what I am saying is that we've been so compulsively focused for the last decade on balancing the budget that we've really lost focus on thinking about the budget in a responsible and, in my view, sophisticated way. And that is, there are some expenditures that fall under the category of waste, fraud, and abuse. Some of them, as I say, which are good-hearted. No, they're all good-hearted. But some which are critical for the economic engine of the United States. And in some cases, I mentioned the military, critical for our defense. For us not to make those investments, is really damaging. And it's a matter of balance again. I think we have been focusing way too much on balancing the budget. And by the way, it won't work. It is not going to dig us out of the problem. And not focusing enough on real investment that we need in this country. If you look at the statistics, our infrastructure is declining, such that it is less good than other places. I like to say, and I hate to put it this way, but I will. So anybody take the Excella in this room? Excella? The Excella? How many people have taken the bullet train in Japan? Well, the bullet train in Japan, I think the record of being not on time since 1940 is about 0, and it goes at 280 miles an hour, and it's comfortable, and it's cheap. I say Excella is to bullet train as warthog is to gazelle. They are both animals, but we cannot succeed if everything we have here is in that level of competence. Our own educational prowess has declined. We're not the first nation in education. We're about the 15th or 18th or 20th. We are not going to be able to compete. We're not going to have the jobs. We're not going to have the tax dollars. We're not going to balance the budget unless we invest in our children and the opportunity to advance a society. So there are good ways to use your money and bad ways to use your money. Time for one more question. Yes, sir.
Does Watson have any predictions about mankind's economic or political future within the next few years?
The last question, not a good question, but almost an impossible question. It says, what's my predictions about, with all this technology, mankind's future in the next few years? So as I look into my sorcerer's globe, it's pretty cloudy. And so let me say this. First, there's an IARPA study. Has anybody read Super Forecasting, the book? If you haven't, read the book. Super Forecasting is a great book. It is a discussion of an IARPA study of about 15 years ago in terms of trying to identify those people who could forecast better than others. We all try to do it for the financial markets, not all, but in terms of what stock's going up. They did this study. And they actually found, a lot of it was done at the University of Pennsylvania, by the way, I think of Pennsylvania. And they found that you could differentiate between good forecasters and bad forecasters in a 6-month horizon. That is, you could look at the traits that were better looking 6 months out. But the interesting thing that the ARPA study found and the CIA found is that if you look 10 years out, no prediction is statistically worth anything. And if you take periods of 10 years going back 150 years and actually read the predictions of the pundits, of the leaders, etc., it's just stunning. Nobody predicted the First World War. Nobody predicted the Great Depression. No, they go on and on in this book about how the predictions are all wrong. I would say, having said that, so I'm going to step into something that I know I can't win on, but I'll give you one, a prediction, and then two, a comment. The prediction is, of this I'm certain, over the next several years in the United States, the one thing you can count on is uncertainty and volatility. So that you can count on. We are living, particularly now, in incredibly uncertain times, and the volatility, notwithstanding what the VIX says, is going to be considerable. The second thing is, just a comment. And this is important for us to, get through to our children. Because of the technological and globalization comments I made, but probably pretty true in all of human history, we've got to be able to inculcate in our young people a sense of service, a sense of values, and a sense of energy that is equivalent to our founding fathers' sense of duty and responsibility and hard work in the 18th century and the 1700s. Because we are in a world of change and are challenged much more greatly than seems to be the case, certainly when you're playing golf on a pretty sunny day like today. But we are in that world. And if we don't respond to it with the kind of vigor and the kind of purpose and the kind of values that was the bottom line for our founding fathers, including men and women from York when the Continental Congress is here, then I fear we are in a very, very bad state for the future. On the other hand, I'm an optimist, and I believe the kind of integrity and quality you see in this room and in the young people in this community hold great promise for a better world. America has been the beacon on the hill for the rest of the world. I think we can still be that, but it's all up to us and it's up to our children to achieve it. Thank you very much.